Hello, friends. Welcome to autumn. This is the season of the harvest, the fruition of all the growth of spring and summer. This is true for us as well, as we receive the benefits from our work and projects, our relationships, and our health from all the energy we put into these areas during the last 6 months. The seeds we have sown, now shall we reap. This coming from the book Staying Healthy with the Seasons. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for joining us today. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program, and autumn is a very special time of year. If you had joined us on our program last time, you'll remember we talked about a Russian best-selling book simply titled Anastasia, in which she was able to encounter a Russian steamboat captain and show him how, as man, we have certainly, for our technocratic society, separated ourselves from nature to where we no longer understand it as well as we should. We begin to change and maintenance our health through the use of pharmaceuticals and aids of the like, but a lot of us want to try to find a way to get reconnected back to that, to feel the wonderful benefits of what it is like to not only be able to stay healthy with all seasons, but to reconnect and find ourselves as one with nature. Joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today is a Seattle native, and she is the fourth-generation Washingtonian, and the beauty of the Puget Sound region runs deep into her veins. She is the owner of Terra Flora Farm, and she is also a mother of 3 wonderful men, and she also likes to connect with the land that she grew up in as well. And she's here to talk with us today about the wonders of autumn and what we should come to understand about it. And Laura Sweeney, I'd like to welcome you to the Beyond 50 radio program today.
Thank you so much, Daniel. I'm really pleased to be with you.
Now, I like the fact that you're also the chairman, as I understand it, or should I say a longtime council member of the Human and Fairy Relations Congress. Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, this is a summertime festival that's held in eastern Washington State. It's right after the summer solstice, and it's an exploration and a celebration of how we as human beings can choose to connect more deeply with the natural realm. You could say that's fairies, you can say that's elves, you can say that's a variety of different energies. A lot of cultures have called them different things, but we have come to understand that there's a real deep and powerful relationship that exists that we've been missing out on, particularly in a modern American culture. And it's a great way to reconnect intentionally with the land and the energetic beings that live in the land. It sounds all very heady and new age, I'm sure, but actually it's a lot of fun, a lot of music and play, as well as some good learning and some wonderful experience.
I know sometimes it seems that New Age gets attached to what was always in existence, if you will. And you said a key word that I think is so important, especially as people begin to grow older and they approach midlife. We've spent, let's say, most of the first 50 years of our lives maybe taking life way too seriously, to the point that even going on vacation no longer feels like you're playing and getting the rest that you're taking your vacation for. What do you think it is that has happened to where we've sort of fallen into that cycle, if you will?
Yeah, I think of the phrase taking a vacation from your vacation.
Exactly. You get home and you feel more relaxed than you did while you were out there on vacation. So.
Exactly. I think it has to do with the momentum of modern culture, and certainly modern American culture. We, as a culture, are really focused on the imperative toward action, toward doing, toward being busy, toward creating, and we don't leave enough time for rest, for contemplation, for gentle play and exploration. And when I think about those kinds of vacation activities and the way we choose to live a lot of our lives, it's so busy, it's so active. And that's one of the things that I like to reconnect with this time of the year is the ability to find the beauty and the juice in being quiet and being reflective and allowing the downtime of the year to really influence how I am.
It's interesting, too, Laura, as we're talking about fall, autumn, is it has always been, me personally, one of my, if not my most favorite season, especially if it still stays a little bit warm. And in the Northwest, I've always told people I found fall to be one of the best seasons that you can experience, at least in the United States, as far as states goes, to be one of the most beautiful places to experience fall. And that's because there's a way that the air is just sort of heavy. It's like you can see it. And as you said, it sort of creates that quietness and that feeling that you can introspect. Let's talk about the significance of fall and perhaps introspection.
You're so right about the sensory nature of the air here in the Pacific Northwest. That's something I've noticed having grown up here. I notice it when I travel, and it's not there anymore.
Right.
I've heard it described as a walk-in facial. But the ambient moisture in the air, especially in the fall, creates such an amazing sensation on my skin. It's like a blanket. It's sort of lovely, and it's cool, and it encourages me to wrap myself up and get warm again. I think on the East Coast they have it in the summertime, and it's more of an irritation because it's so hot and you can't escape from it. But here I like it because it encourages me to cozy up.
Mm-hmm. And now let's talk about autumn and what the significance is, because I think one of the questions I've had over and over, apparently, and for some reason people kind of look to me as, you seem to know about everything, and I don't know about that. I think I know a lot of people who know about a lot of things is what it is, but you can't help but getting that information eventually. But they ask, what is the significance, for instance, of the harvest moon and like Oktoberfest, for instance? Now, the Europeans really have it down in their cultures as far as the celebration of the harvest, but let's talk about the significance of that.
Yeah, the Europeans, because they're older cultures, they're very much grounded in tradition. And when you get back before the Industrial Revolution, before there was so much emphasis placed on a modern way of living, cross-culturally, you will find that fall is, in fact, a celebration of how your growing season has gone. It's a time to give thanks to the earth and to the spirits for the bounty that they have provided. It's a way of resting from all of the hard work of having brought in the harvest, having canned and dried and worked really hard to make sure that you've done everything you can to preserve what you need to get you through the dark months. And it's the beginning of the end of the wheel of the year. There's a cyclic nature to natural life, where there's spring and summer, which are blooming and growing, very active, very young, very forceful, a lot of outward momentum. And then there's fall and winter, which bring the circle back around again to being more introspective, less active. The weather conspires to keep us inside, and the light itself, as it wanes, encourages us to bring that energy back inside in a way that, as I continue to work on that in myself and watch my friends work on it, it just becomes more and more satisfying. I don't think it's coincidental that as I'm aging, I'm aware of the values of less. I'm aware of how precious things are in relation to the idea of passing. And boy, I really start to feel these influences coming on strong in the fall.
For those of you just tuning in, we're talking with our guest today about fall. It's a wonderful time of year for a lot of us if we come to understand it better than we have, it seems like. Laura Sweeney joining us here on the program today. Now, Laura, it's really interesting because this is also a time of year where you start to hear people grumble, oh, I miss the sun being out until 8 o'clock at night, or, it's setting way too early. It's 4:30. It already feels like it's 9 o'clock. And now there's apparently, and this has been around for a while, I know my mother believes she suffered from it, which was the seasonal affective disorder. Mm-hmm. It's the idea of the sun, just you're not exposed to it as much as you were. But, it's really interesting, too, in the Northwest, Laura, and you can disagree or agree with me one way or the other, but it seems that we're seeing more sun in the Northwest than we used to. I mean, before we used to have a lot of rain, but you don't see it as much as you used to. So when you're in this new fall cycle where the sun just isn't as available, it's interesting when you think of the harvest and you think of plants that the idea, as you said, is to pull inside of the house, that if anybody has a fireplace, you wouldn't need to be taking any kind of medication whatsoever because you would still get the light of the sun through the burning of the wood.
That's true. That's one way to look at it. I tend to think that the reason that we call seasonal affective disorder or SADS a disorder is because we as a culture are not comfortable with introspection.
I see.
In other cultures, the Scandinavian cultures, the northern cultures, where when it gets dark, it gets really dark and it stays dark for a long time, they look to people who are deeply affected by that darkness as keepers of wisdom, about how to access those quieter parts of ourselves. That's a revered function. I think this is a way that we can be connected with natural cycles even if we don't recognize that we are. It's an intuitive sense. It's nature acting in us. So, for example, my former husband was very affected by SADS, and for many years we looked upon that as a problem, and now he looks upon it as a gift because it allows him to be guided into refocusing his attention on what's happening inside. And because he's going through that, then I see him do that, and it reminds me to do that, and my children see him doing that. It reminds them to do that. It has this beautiful ripple effect.
Now, when a person tends to pull inside because of the fact that fall, the daylights are a lot shorter, a lot of times what people will also do, especially in this day and age, is unlike what we're suggesting here, which is introspection, that time to reflect on you and your life, is they turn on cable television. And it's like, wait a minute here. It's not that you should not do that. People love television, movies, and entertainment, but there were times that I would catch myself doing it, and I'd shut it off and just open the fireplace, and I could sit there for hours just looking into the fire, and just the soothingness of it, to me, really gave me that opportunity, as you're talking about introspection. Talk about why introspection is so important, especially during these seasons.
Fire is a very powerful element. Again, an example of reconnecting in an intuitive way with some deeply ancient elements that we forget that we know how to connect with. Light bulbs and natural light are something that people forget that it wasn't always there. And one of the things that I like to remember to do in the fall and the winter is to consciously take some time to turn off the light and even turn off the electricity. So I know some people who do this, one day a week where you choose to experience the darkness without the modern conveniences. So no cable TV, no big banks of fluorescent lights, sitting in front of the fire, using candles, having the opportunity to read, to work on some craft, to do massage if you have a partner that works with, to take a nice warm bath. Those are all rejuvenating ways to approach this darker time. They in the plant world, what you notice in the fall and the winter is not that the plants die, but they refocus their energy. They take what had been going out in the leaves and the branches and the flowers, and they pull it back in and they use it to develop their root structures. So I think knowing that, we can use those same kinds of techniques to restore our root structures as well.
Now, that's an interesting point, visually speaking. Now, Laura, what are some other ways or reminders that we can have around us that'll remind us of the strength and vibrancy of what the autumn represents?
Well, there's, of course, all kinds of celebration that's associated with autumn and early winter. We have a lot of, like you said, Oktoberfest, Thanksgiving, Yule, Christmas, and these are all really active celebrations. And I find it a lot more engaging to take the time to remember that what I'm doing is celebrating the bounty, but doing it in an intentional way. So choosing to bring the energy down and make some of my gifts myself. Take the time to learn maybe one new skill. I'm not talking about being Martha Stewart here and doing all kinds of decorating, all kinds of crafting, and all kinds of cooking, and all kinds of fabulous stuff.
Make sure these dishes match with this potato here, otherwise it just won't turn out the way it should.
Exactly, and all kinds of shopping. I mean, the economy has given us a tremendous gift right now for us to be able to pull inside and look to ourselves and what we have at hand to get what we want and to have what we need. I like to spend each fall and winter picking one new skill that I want to develop. Last year it was playing the mandolin. I bought myself a mandolin because I'd been thinking about it for several years. And I knew I wouldn't be distracted by wanting to be outside. So I chose the dark time as a time to practice my mandolin skills. And it was a wonderful opportunity. Another way to celebrate this time of year is to concentrate on the idea of home and hearth. So cooking is, of course, a great way to reconnect with the seasons. What you choose to cook can also be a reminder. Eating a lot of root vegetables at this time of year. For those of your listeners who go to farmers markets that are still open, and what's available is the root crops and the ciders and the jams and jellies, things that have been preserved. Using those wintertime sustenance foods as your basis is another way to reconnect. And when you go to the grocery store, yeah, it's tempting to get a pineapple from Hawaii and some plums from Argentina and peaches from Australia. And I find I actually learn a little bit more about myself and my place in the world by going to those farmers markets and concentrating on the foods that are in season. That helps me to stay in the season.
I like that you brought up the idea of what to eat in season because, excuse me, we live in a time and an age that we can make any food during any season available anytime to eat. And it's so true and it's so important, Laura, that we pick and choose food that would be grown and ripe and available within the season that generally it should be available in. Just as you suggested, you should be eating root vegetables. And sure, it's okay to go get the pineapple from Hawaii, but that's more of a summer fruit. And there's a reason for that. It's because of the heat, and it refreshes you and hydrates you at the same time. And also you were talking about farmers markets, trying to get to more organic ways of eating again, to the point that you come to understand yourself versus big business agriculture that sort of separates itself from producing food in such a way that it produces it simply to feed people versus nourish people. Let's talk about the difference between being fed and being nourished. Because to me it sounds like that's one of those key elements that help with this introspection, that getting to know yourself during this time that we should be pulling in and enjoying the fact that we have more darkness now.
Yes, and you're right that supermarkets and the vast array of choices that they contain are sort of like the light bulbs of the food world. You know, they help us forget.
We can get a mango any time of the year now.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not saying don't do that, you know.
No, of course not.
Do it intentionally. Doing it intentionally is where I think it's important to remain. I'm not suggesting that we become food Nazis, but using what is presented to us as spurs or as keys to reconnect. This idea of reconnecting with the seasons it's in our bones. It's in our blood. It's our heritage as human beings. And the idea that we have to go off on some spiritual retreat or really go to some workshop and learn how to do this is
or buying CDs on sounds in nature.
Exactly. That's all really. I mean, you can do that, and that's fine too.
Yeah.
And it can also be a distraction from the really simple things that can reconnect us at this time of year, because this is a time of year for simplicity, for paring down, for decline and decrease. We see it all around us. We see it in the plants. We see it in the sun. And it can be a really wonderful opportunity for us to not only just reconnect spiritually, but doing things like going through your house and decluttering. That idea of letting go of things is one of the things that I like to do at this time of year. And another thing that I've discovered, and this was, again, presented by just happenstance, is remembering or rediscovering that in these holiday gatherings, when I have all kinds of family members around, that I have elders there, that I have my grandparents, I have my parents. And I had forgotten until just a couple of years ago how precious it is that we all come together at this time of year and have the opportunity to tell stories. And I have the opportunity to ask my elders who are in the autumn of their lives to share their wisdom with me. And it doesn't have to be, any big ceremonial thing. But again, it's an opportunity that is presented to me that I can choose very easily to pick up and work on. I appreciate that.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying I appreciate that it's easy. It's all right there.
Yeah, I was just having images when you were talking about the gathering of family. Of course, Thanksgiving is one of those times that come to mind. But that almost seems, at least in my experience over the last several years, even as a kid at times, that Thanksgiving took on the connotation of basically being the glutton bowl, but only within your family. The idea was to hit that table with the most food you've probably seen all year on the table and eat as much of it as you can, and then scream, "So what are the desserts?" And the way you've put it is a more poetic essence of, I think what Thanksgiving really represents is that coming together, being inside. And it would have been neat to actually sit there and talk and hear stories. But again, you hit the Thanksgiving table once they say dinner's on, and then what you do after that is you go back to what you were doing while you were waiting for dinner, which is watching bowl games, which I don't really care for myself, but that seems to be the cycle this day and age. So you can see why people would carry a lot of frustration throughout the entire year. It seems, anyway.
Yeah, I really like how Thanksgiving has metamorphosed in some quarters into something a little bit more community-oriented. Mm-hmm. It used to be that one person put on this big, huge spread, and everybody came and sat and ate, watched television.
And then left the dishes to the host.
Right, and then went away and watched some more television.
Right, exactly. And that was such a disconnected experience to me.
Oh, yeah. And now as I just stumbled on this. I don't even know how it happened. But I have lovely memories of people continuing to sit around the table after the meal is eaten and, we pushed ourselves back and unbuttoned our pants. And start talking, just start asking questions about, Grandma, what do you remember from Thanksgiving when you were a little girl? Or tell us about what kinds of foods you ate, or how long did it take for you to, how much time did it take for your family to put that together? And to sit around and share those stories is way better than any bowl game I can imagine.
No, absolutely. Yes, especially good Thanksgiving stories of
and it's
the haunted
there.
turkey. So.
Yeah, right. Yes, sharing family memories. Oh, always an excellent thing. Yeah. And there's a quality of mystery to this time of year. There's a quality of intuition that as people reach back in their memory banks and they think about their memories of years past and they draw those things out and everybody then reconnects with their memories as well. We all share these things. There's really a mystery there that I think is another hallmark of this season. The idea of, if you look at yin and yang, I'm sure some of your listeners are familiar with the Asian active and passive qualities.
Mm-hmm.
You can think about the wheel of the year as having active and passive components based on the sun. And I tend to think of this time of year as a passive time. And one of the hallmarks of the idea of passiveness is the drawing down, the internal, but the mystery, the idea of being okay with not knowing everything, celebrating that even. And that's one of those great things that winter festivals, fall and winter festivals have as their elements, the idea of how did that happen? The pagan community for the winter solstice, there's the idea of will the sun come back? That bit of mystery. And I really like remembering that, being okay with that, the not knowing of it. Because we spend so much time in our culture planning and doing and
moving and micromanaging and needing to get things done, and they need to get done on time, and I never have enough time to get it all done. What am I going to do?
I really think that goes back to our Puritan work ethic,
mm-hmm.
that we are humans doing instead of humans being.
Yeah, exactly. It's time for them to change that in the dictionary, I believe.
Yeah.
You're a human doing.
Sometimes I feel like I'm so out of step because I don't want to be a human doing. I want to be a human being.
And what's interesting, too, about that, Laura, is that it seems like in America especially that we're all striving to become wealthy so that we can just settle down and do nothing or, sort of have that time freedom. And what's the point of all that?
Oh, yeah, there you go. Well, I tend to look forward to my annual times of not doing
mm-hmm.
so much.
Exactly.
We have the opportunity to do that every year instead of waiting until, we're at the very end of things.
Funny, as we reflect on nature here, I was just thinking of a funny image. If lions don't have a problem sleeping 9 out of the 12 years of their lives, why should we? If we sleep 9 years of our lives, our average odds are we're still going to have 64 active years that we're doing something.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Now, as we're starting to run short on time, let's talk about your farm a little bit. And is this a place people can go to obviously meet you and learn more about what we're talking about here?
Well, what I do is I actually work as both an active and a passive force with the folks that I consult for, using their land to help them reconnect individually with the land that they steward and help them to understand how do they want that relationship to be. Do they want to be able to eat from their land? Do they want fragrance? Do they want herbs to cook with? Mm-hmm. How does that work for them? And so although I do grow food on my own land, it's the idea of the farm is not as concrete as that. It's everybody's farm. It's not just a place where I grow food. And I use the concept of permaculture, which is a whole systems approach to allowing nature to do a lot of the work that we human beings would normally have chosen to do. Again, it's celebrating the less active aspects of getting things done by fostering compost and using leaves as a way to smother grass so that I don't actually have to pull up the sod. It's taking the idea of how little do I have to do to get what I want. I know it's a very unusual perspective to take, but
well, no, I really enjoy, because through our program over 5 years that we've been doing it, we bring in, I guess if you want to call them farming or gardening talks, that I find very unique. Certainly you fit definitely in that category, because it reminds us that a tree is not just this thing that's separate from you. It's just not there. It's not inanimate. It's alive. It knows you, especially if you're around it quite often. Grass is the same way. Flowers, the food that you eat. Should you grow your food, it takes on a whole new dynamic about your relationship with nature and with yourself. And earlier in the program, I was talking about a book that we just came across and had the opportunity to have its translating author on our program, called Anastasia, which, if you get an opportunity, talk to people about this in your community, because that's exactly what it's all about, is us reconnecting with the oneness that is us. And certainly you can see how a time like autumn would be one of those moments that you reflect or introspect on the fact that you are not separate from anything at all. You're uniquely here in this world because of that uniqueness, to be one with all things. And it gives you a very comfortable feeling to where fear no longer has to exist for any reason.
Oh, yes. And that brings up an excellent point. I believe that one of the reasons why Americans, as a culture, don't like to look inside is they're afraid.
Mm-hmm.
They're afraid of the mystery of it all. And you can choose to revel in that mystery, and then that fear turns into the connection that I hear you speaking of, because it's something we all experience. It's something that happens in the natural world around us, and we can allow that to inform our belief that it is part of us. It is our birthright as a being here on this earth, that we don't need to be afraid. That's such a beautiful point.
Well, you think about it, because you talk about, for instance, plants. People see and believe that they are dying in the fall and in the winter, when in fact they're just withdrawing or changing, I guess, what they are. And that's the same thing about death in the animal world, is that it isn't something, even though they say that you do alone, that you do alone. You really don't, because you're just changing from, I guess, one reality to a new reality within a whole system, a natural system of laws. And if people could come to understand that, take this time, as you've been suggesting, Laura, during these long, dark months, to introspect and realize this, then you wouldn't spend so much time, and in fact, it's a super billion-dollar industry, how we can move away from fear. And the number one fear, obviously, is the fear of dying, but that's a part of living. But the more you can introspect that and realize you're not alone, that you're connected with one and everything, again, fear just has no place. It just doesn't. And then you find yourself, as you have suggested, take this time to learn a new skill. I don't suggest somebody run out and buy a drum kit, because you don't know how anybody's going to react to that, but certainly a mandolin is a good choice.
Sure. That reminds me of a wonderful technique that I tend to bring out this time of year. Do we have time to...
We have just, about 2 minutes.
Okay. This is what's called 4-phase breathing. And, of course, breath is the beginning of life. So breathing exercises really help me very quickly ground into what's primally important. And it allows me to physically manifest the equal importance of both gathering and releasing. And it's super simple. All you have to do is breathe in for 4 counts and hold that breath for 4 counts and release it for 4 counts and then be empty for 4 counts. And it mirrors the wheel of the year. It mirrors the growth and decline of the plants around us. And it allows me to reconnect with the feeling of drawing something in, feeling that abundance, and then allowing myself to release it and allow myself to feel empty and to know that just again there will be another in-breath. I find that kind of practice really simple. Don't have to buy anything to learn it. Can practice it whenever I remember, and it's really calming.
It's always good to talk with people like yourself about subjects like this, just because it reminds us that we don't have to run off and buy a CD, although if you want to, that's fine, about the sounds in nature when you can find them. Hopefully it isn't a neighbor screaming at their husband or something like that, but, that is a sound in nature, and it reminds you as you retrospect, hey, I'm glad we don't do that too much.
Yeah.
And just to take the time to understand this, I think what's funny, especially in America, is how we market and advertise things, how we tend to brand things. And you take a look at Oktoberfest, for instance, the first thing on everybody's mind is, let's see how much beer we can drink. And I'm thinking, but that's not really what Oktoberfest is. That's only a small element of it, Or you take a look at Halloween, it's about going out and getting the most candy that you can get, but what you're missing is the transformation that you get to be something else, and there's a deep understanding as you look at these two areas that occur in the autumn, and you realize there is a lot of intelligence, if you want to call it, in the pagan way of viewing and experiencing things that really reminds us that's what we should be doing, is getting back to feeling interconnected with everything and everyone. And Laura Sweeney, it's been a pleasure to have you here on our program today. Is there a way people can find out more about what you do?
Well, if you want to find out more about the Fairy Congress, the summer festival that we talked about that helps folks to get in touch with their place in nature and how to connect and play with those nature spirits, we have, of course, our website, which is www.fairycongress.com. And I encourage folks to surf the web and to know that it's all right there at any moment. It's all around us. We don't have to go anywhere to reconnect. And that's what I really appreciate remembering.
Well, very good. Well, Laura, again, it's been a pleasure to have you on the program today. I'm sure we'll probably have you back again because you always bring such nice insights about how we just sometimes need to just take it easy.
Oh, thank you, Daniel. It's been
you bet.
Pleasure.
Thank you again. Our guest today, Laura Sweeney, joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program. Would also like to thank one of our sponsors here for joining us here on the program as well. And just to let you know that if the human body constantly is exposed to heavy metal toxins, which stay in your body and can directly lead to an endless list of neurological and physical problems, some of them can be catastrophic. Calorix is a particular program that you can get on which can help you remove these heavy metals so that way you don't have to suffer the possible sicknesses and diseases that these can cause. To simply find out more about this, I urge you to go to the Calorix.com website immediately and read what Calorix will do for you. Again, that website is Calorix, spelled CHELOREX.com, and get on there immediately and find out how Calorix can help you. This is from Science Formulas. Want to thank you also for the listeners out there for joining us here on the program. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to visit us at our website, which is beyond50radio.com. That's the number 50 with a 50. Sign up for our free weekly e-newsletter, which is multimedia. You'll find our present as well as past interviews on there. Great things to do. Also to share with your friend. Please forward it to a friend as well. And that's simply visiting the website at beyond50radio.com, the number 50. Thank you for tuning in today. I'm Daniel Davis, and remember, live your day past halfway.